Now we have started to mention Sahibzada Abdul Latif Shahid. I would like to tell you something else, something more about him. Because he was a very special person. He was not an ordinary man. You know, his status in Kabul was that of the chief alim, the greatest in Afghanistan. Officially, he was the alim of the court of the Amir. And he was respected far and wide in the entire country. He was not a small man, you know, a mullah who was the chief of all the mullahs. And he was so pious that he used to receive revelations from Allah, and he had seen this, that this was going to happen to him in his visions. He was all ready. When he went to Qadian, it so happened that he was going to say Hajj. He was on way to say Hajj. He had gone to India from Kabul with the purpose of proceeding further through Bombay. In those days, you know, they used to take ship. And he heard that somebody has come to be a Mahdi. When he heard this, he said, look here, this is a very important thing. Because Muhammad Rasulullah has predicted that a Mahdi would appear. And if you hear, then you must go to meet him. So he said, I must go there because this is more important in this sense that Hajj not going to be performed next year, but Mahdi is the person of many, many centuries, you know. And it is highlighted by Rasulullah that when you hear of him, you must go to him. So he said, I must investigate. So he went to Qadian just by way of finding out if he is right or wrong. When he saw him, he didn't ask for anything. That's why I said he was a Siddiq as well as a Shaheed. He looked at his face and he said, this man cannot be a liar. It's impossible. And then he spoke a few words with him and discussed some matters of his claim. And he was a great alim himself. He understood every word. He said, yes, you're absolutely right. Then he decided to stay there in his company for a while. So he stayed there. He was so, he fell in such love with him that he lost his personal honor, dignity, everything. He was a completely subjugated person, a man of the humblest in his appearance before him. Once he bent down and touched his feet. Hazrat said, don't do it. But he just couldn't help. So then Hazrat Masih said, Al-Amru Faqul Adam. Immediately, he straightened up. No hesitation anymore. That type of person he was. Very enlightened. When he took leave of Messiah Islam, he knew he would not see him again. It was a very sad departure. But he went with the resolution that he must offer his martyrdom to the country where he belonged. Now, some very interesting things have come to light which I want to share with you, because now when we have started talking to him, you must know all about and around him what happened. Although before martyrdom he was kept under the severest torture that you can imagine, but he didn't wilt. He remained steadfast and upright. Nothing changed his will. So at last this happened, as I told you. And now I quote a British writer who has written a book on the Amir which ruled in those days. It is more than 100 years ago that this happened. His name was Habibullah, and he was a very despotic Amir. So the title of this book is Under the Absolute Amir. Now this man was an English engineer, British engineer, of a very renowned person, and so knowledgeable in his branch of science that he was appointed by the Amir of Kabul to be the chief engineer of Afghanistan. He was the head of all engineering departments. He had no knowledge about Ahmadiyyat, about anything. He only mentioned things about hearsay. So what he says of hearsay in his book is just wrong. One can see that this was fed to him by the reporters who wanted willfully to malign Ahmadiyyat. So there is obviously, every Ahmadi can immediately know that he is being fed on gossip and things, one-sided stories about Ahmadiyyat. But what he tells about with his own eyes, there suddenly you see the style change. And everything is so correctly and precisely reported that had he not done that, we might never have known as to what happened and all along how he behaved and this and that. So by the grace of Allah, these most important moments of his life and the history of Ahmadiyyat were preserved in that book. And I have read that book with deep interest, and I found this difference, Now he, among other things, he reports how he went to the Maqtal, to the place where he was to be martyred. He reports about the role of Nasrullah Khan. He reports about the role of the Amir. He tells that just before he was about to be martyred, the Amir deeply respected him so much, in fact, that he went to him and whispered into his ears, "I want to save you. Please say now that you're not an Ahmadi." They said, "Qadiani." I said, "No question, do it, what you like." And then he says that Amir told him, "All right, I'll announce it myself. You are not saying anything." He said, "You will not permit it to do that. Otherwise he would shout back that Amir is lying." So he left no room for the Amir to help him in any way, because it was related to his change of his beliefs. And then he says when he was walking the streets, he was bound hand and foot with heavy chains, and he walked with such dignity that it is rare to see such dignity in a man like he was. All this description is what he saw with his own eyes. Then he reports that just before the last order for his stoning was given, Abdul Latif Shahid addressed the Amir and the others around him. He said, "Look here, you are making a very grave blunder, and you are going to pay very heavily, because God has told me that such calamity will befall this country in response to what you are doing to me, that it will be rare that you have never seen such punishment as God has told me is going to befall you." Now some we are witnessing now. There is no need for any British historian to preserve. Everybody knows what's happening. But what he reports is very strange and so fascinating, unbelievable, because he didn't believe in Ahmadiyyat. He had no idea what Ahmadiyyat was. But he was so impressed with what happened immediately after that he said, "I must report it." While the issue of the book is political, but he deviates and pauses to tell this story completely, and then he starts the subject, takes up the subject again. So he says that after he was martyred, everybody was surprised to see a deeply yellow windstorm, dust storm it's called, andhi. Because everybody was surprised, because nobody had ever seen such a threatening looking yellow storm before in their lives. And in Kabul, such dust storms do not come. I mean, they are left around in other parts of Afghanistan, but they don't reach Kabul itself. And particularly, he said, they were further surprised because that was not the season for these dust storms. And it suddenly came, and it was so threatening that everybody rushed back. Not like something which happened at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, And then people started talking. They said, he was right. There was something about this man which God loved and He's going to punish us. Then he said, within a few days' time, suddenly cholera erupted and struck Kabul and the areas around, despite the fact that there was no season for cholera. So he said people started dying in streets, in homes, everywhere, and that cholera was so punishing that the people died in absolute torture. Now, the interesting thing is yet to come. He said the Amir of Kabul, not Afghanistan, this Nasrullah Khan, who was mainly instrumental for this cruelty to him, he was afraid. He was scared. Deep inside, he started to believe that it is the punishment from Allah what I have done to this man. So he shut the doors of his palace, completely locked himself in. And he said no food or water can come in, nothing will go out. Every servant, every body was locked in completely, and the palace was sealed. Now this is the reporting of this the British engineer. This is not something I am making up for myself. Anybody can see from the library under the absolute Amir, and he will read these things. Now he says there was a young wife of his whom he loved madly, and he was afraid for her more than for himself. And despite all the precautions, she died before him with such torture that it turned him mad. And ever since, the Amir of Governor of Kabul was not heard of in public, was not seen in public, because he had lost control of his mental faculties, and he became a raving mad person. So that is why he was hidden from public appearance, and he was never seen again in public. He said, this is what I have seen with my own eyes. I don't know what happened, why it happened, but I stand witness to this, that as the Shaheed said, exactly, even more surprisingly, punishing the punishment of God and wrath of God befell that country. Now that is what he knew, and his knowledge was limited to that time. What we know is that ever since Afghanistan has never had any moment of peace. The bloodshed which continues now is inexplicable. There is no Russian presence, no threat to Islam in any way. But they are fighting with each other, one after the other. One group is fighting the other, and the third is created, and they also join in. And there doesn't not seem to be any prospects of peace in Afghanistan, and yet they do not understand. Those of the followers of Hazrat Sahibzada Abdul Latif Shahid who belong to his family, they are honored by Allah, and they are found everywhere in the world in such high places of honor and dignity, professionally, otherwise. But that part of the family which didn't follow him are still living like paupers in the same old area. So strange things have happened on either side, on the punishing side as well as the rewarding side. So this was not an ordinary shahada, it was a great shahada.